I didn't know anyone like me. I didn't see any Christian women out there that were talking openly about their struggles with alcohol. And so I didn't have anyone to turn to go to. It felt weird to even think about telling someone, hey, I think I have a problem. I always knew one day I was going to have to get sober, but I just didn't know how. I was telling myself that from the time I was in my 20s. But I thought, I'm in my 20s, I can't do it now. But as time went on and I continued to have a very unhealthy relationship with alcohol throughout the years, I knew this can't go on forever. And though there were some fun times, there were some great times I had, there were also some very destructive times in my life, some very unsafe times where I put myself in really unsafe positions, where I made really bad decisions, where I'm lucky that I actually survived some of these situations. And, you always think, eventually this is going to go away, or I'll get a hang on this, or, I'm growing into adulthood, things will get better. But really things just shift unless you have an intentional move to make a change. When you have an unhealthy, almost addictive relationship with alcohol, it's only going to suck you in further without making an intentional change in your life to get control over that. And so I would never admit that I had a problem, because here I was, this young professional. I graduated college. I got a first job. I was living in Washington, D.C. I was living the life. I was very successful. I was doing all the things that you would want to be doing in your 20s. And yet I had this secret. I seemed to be the only one of my roommates that would drink almost nightly. I was the only one that would sort of sneak someone else's alcohol and drink it and then have to go refill it because I was too embarrassed to tell them I drank their alcohol. I seemed to have a pull towards alcohol that other people didn't have. And I knew it was weird, but I wasn't willing to really face head on what it was. All this time I was a Christian, I was going to church, I was going on mission trips. And so I couldn't tell anyone I had a problem because, first of all, no one called me out. So I didn't even know if anyone would believe me. And number two, I didn't want anyone to think I really did have a huge problem and then tell me I couldn't keep drinking. So I was caught in this catch-22. And at the same time, I didn't know anyone like me. I didn't see any Christian women out there that were talking openly about their struggles with alcohol. And so I didn't have anyone to turn to go to. It felt weird to even think about telling someone, hey, I think I have a problem. So I just didn't. I kept it to myself. And I thought all the time, man, I wish I had the bravery or the courage to go to an AA meeting or just explore what this is all about. But instead I ignored, the warning signs within me and just kept on keeping on. Well, eventually I moved out of my 20s. I got married. I had babies. And I thought, surely when motherhood hits, this is going to get better, right? I'm not going to keep being this big drinker right after motherhood. But instead of it going away, it just transitioned and shifted into a different kind of problem. So I had no problem not drinking when I was pregnant, but I really looked forward to drinking once the baby was born. And so in the course of raising my two babies, drinking heavily became something I did on a regular basis. So I wasn't going out to bars and, doing all the crazy things that I once did in my 20s, but I was drinking wine every night. I was finding a reason to get wine in my home every night and drink it. And I found every excuse under the sun to justify what I was doing. Everyone drinks wine, right? Mom, relax, you deserve it. Cooking dinner, who likes to cook dinner? If I can have wine, that makes it so much better. And then you get that feeling, that buzzy feeling, and you don't want to let that go. And then because alcohol is a toxic, addictive substance, your body begins to crave that every day. And so it wasn't like so easy to say, oh, I'm not going to, I'm only going to drink certain days or other days. It was like every single night my body was saying, I need that to get through the night. And so I got onto this pattern of drinking wine every single day. And there were times when it was worse, like holiday events and things like that. I would always overdrink and always regret it and always feel like garbage. And mothering in the mornings when you're hungover is pretty much the worst thing you will ever feel. You'd think that would stop you from ever doing it again. But the pull of alcohol's addictiveness is just too much. And so I found myself in those situations over and over and over again. And at the same time, I'm over here and I'm a writer. I'm writing Christian books. I'm leading Bible study. I'm at church every Sunday. I am from all, outside looking in, I'm thriving. I have this beautiful little family, and yet I'm suffering on the inside. I'm suffering alone. I'm not telling anyone what's going on, and I'm feeling like I have no one to reach out to. So at some point, it got to the point where God said, you've got to do something about this. I didn't know what to do, so I started, perusing the internet, Googling anything I could, buying sobriety memoirs, and just sort of quietly beginning to explore, like, is this even possible? It felt impossible, but I started looking online, trying to find support groups, trying to do a 30-day challenge here and there. Long story short, I was able to pull through 30 days a couple times, but I kept messing up. Eventually I committed and I got through to almost 6 months sober. I even went up in front of my church and I talked about how God had delivered me from this problem with alcohol. And then the pandemic hit. And like so many other people, especially the moms of young children, which, by the way, moms of children under 5 increased their drinking by 383% during the pandemic. Well, my kids were 2 and 4 at that time, and I was one of those women. And I broke down and I started drinking again that summer. But very quickly, things went back to the way they were, where I felt trapped and I almost felt like I felt compelled to drink. I felt like drinking had become this it had a hold over me. Like I couldn't say no, and I would wake up in the middle of the night just terribly regretful and anxious and with a headache and unable to sleep, going, I don't have control over this anymore. Like I said I wouldn't drink and I drank anyway. Like something's wrong here. I've got to do something about this. And it wasn't until I joined a small group and I really took it up with God and I said, God, I can't do this alone. I can't do this because I have to. I can only do this if I can choose to do it my way. If I can choose to do it out of freedom and out of education and knowledge and knowing that you have something better for me on the other side. And so when I started that first 30 days again 5 years ago, I had no idea that was going to be the last time I took a drink, because I had to take it day by day and month by month and even year by year. And here I am 5 years later, and I am free from the hold of alcohol. I am free from the thoughts that consumed me, the rules that I made up, the constant back and forth, and feeling like I was oppressed by this substance. And throughout this time, throughout these 5 years, I've been writing about this on my Substack. I've been writing about it in articles for the New York Times, for the Wall Street Journal, for Christianity Today and USA Today. And I knew I had to write this book for the women that are just like where I was 5 years ago. The women that feel like they can't get out of this, that they are trapped and they don't know how they're going to do it, but they know that they believe in the power of Christ and they believe in healing and freedom that he offers. That is what this book, Freely Sober, is for. It's for the believers, the women that feel like either they have an unhealthy relationship with alcohol, they're using alcohol to self-medicate, they are using it to soothe their anxieties or, resist dealing with certain things in their lives, but they keep going back to it and they regret it every time. They keep going back to it and telling themselves, I'm not going to do this anymore. And then they do it again. You don't have to live like that anymore. And I promise you, I'm not saying it's easy, but I promise you, once you get through 60 days, 90 days, 6 months, things do start to get easier. God does not leave his promises unfulfilled. He can't. So grab a copy of Freely Sober, say your prayers, talk to the Lord about it, and believe that he has something better for you on the other side of this. You can do this, and you don't have to be perfect. You can mess up and you can start over, and you can know that every day that you don't drink is a day that you learn something new about yourself, and a day that God is teaching you something, and a day that pathway that you have between yourself and God, that is opening up and it's allowing you to grow a little bit by little bit. So that is a little bit about my story and why I wrote the book Freely Sober. I hope you'll pick it up. I would love to get your feedback, and I'm rooting for you. I'm praying for you, and I want the best for you.